Hello, welcome back. We are 4 Struggling Filmmakers. My name's Emma. Joined with me is James.
Hello.
Noah.
Hi.
And Jimmy.
Hey guys.
Our eagle-eyed viewers will notice we are also joined by our 5th Struggling Filmmaker this week, none other than Peter Nelson.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me.
That's all right.
Hi, Peter.
Hi Noah.
So Peter, tell us and our audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Peter. I was at university with these guys, and I'm a freelance editor at the moment. Instead of introducing myself anymore, I've actually got an offering for all you and all your viewers. I've recently got involved with a charity that's been set up to support people getting into the film industry, like getting jobs and like meeting people. This is a bit of, I don't know when this episode's going up, and I don't know when this announcement's happening, because this could be an exclusive bit of information here, but they're running a short film competition soon to make like a 60-second film about lockdown with some quite cool prizes. I just thought it could be cool for any struggling filmmakers out there that might want to get involved and see how it can help them. It's osbd.org. I'd recommend it.
So Peter, as you're the guest, would you like to introduce the topic of what we're talking about this week?
Yeah, so this week on 4 Struggling Filmmakers plus Peter, we are discussing we're just discussing about if fans should have a say in franchises. Because we see it more and more often where fans, like, they have a backlash to something and then the studio bends over backwards to sort of apologize and completely change what they did. I thought it'd be interesting to discuss if that's a good thing, and like how far that should go.
Yeah, definitely. And as you may notice, we're not going to do our film recommendations now. We're going to save that till later, and we're going to turn it into a bit of a game. So make sure you stay tuned till the end. Jimmy, did you want to announce any news this week?
Oh yeah, big news. I do actually. Yeah, Gina Carrero, what's her name?
No idea.
Carano, I think.
That's it. Gina Carano has been fired from The Mandalorian.
I tell you what, that news is very topical to this week's topic, so that's crazy.
I think that was fan backlash. I believe it's in response to posting a series of anti-mask comments on social media.
Yeah, or as more specifically, it was like likening it to being a Jew during the Holocaust or something.
That's what I thought it was anti-Semitic.
Oh, do you know? I think she wasn't saying being forced to wear a mask. It was like being a Republican was the same, because like she's always under attack for political views or something. Well, either way, it's not good. Yeah,
that is far worse than I thought it was.
So, fan culture. I've put, ultimately, fans pay to enjoy and watch films. Without them, films would be nothing. However, fans aren't experts on filmmaking, nor do they know what makes a film successful.
Yeah, I think the thing you said about they don't know what makes a successful movie, that might be true, but they also are the factor that makes a successful movie. So you can see that argument from both sides.
I'll jump in quick. I have written pretty much exactly the same thing that you have, Noah. I used a very fun. Well, it's not very funny. I used a comparison. So I said, I'm not going to look at my notes because, I'm just that good. I think that fans are very good at seeing something they hate or seeing something they love without any constructive criticism about how to fix it. In the exact same way that when my car breaks down, I'm aware that something is wrong, but I have no idea how to fix it. And I think that's the problem. Just because you're a fan of something, you enjoy something, doesn't mean you have any knowledge about the construction of it. Mark Kermode would use the same argument for like film criticism. Just because you're a film critic doesn't mean you know how to make a film, for example.
And I will reply with another sort of funny analogy. Jimmy, I'm no helicopter pilot, but if I see one stuck in the tree, I know something's wrong.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do you think bending to fan input and letting your work be, not your work, but like filmmakers' work be influenced by the people who watch it, do you think that hinders artistic license at all?
Yeah, I think that raises like one of the things I was thinking about, because you said about artistic like vision or whatever. Like the other question that it raised for me was like, does what the filmmakers intended matter at all compared to what the fans want? Because for me, like if someone paints a painting and then they release it out into the world, like the artist's vision for it and their viewpoint on it is then the least important one, because like they've put it out there, the spectators are looking at it, what they look at it and see is what they'll see, whatever they want to see, and that's all that matters for them. So it's like once you put it out there, you can't try and control like how people react to it, which doesn't also mean you should then listen to what they're saying, but it's like, yeah, I think fans do have some level of ownership, but that doesn't mean that they know what they want.
They want the validation of knowing a thing is going to happen and then having it happen. It's sort of the thing about like fan theories in general. They're fun to read, like interesting like side stories about like, oh, if this happens, that would be pretty cool, or if this person did this, or this character showed up, or whatever. They're all very interesting. However, just because something sounds cool doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cool in practice.
But then like I know I've seen on Twitter J.K. Rowling, like years ago, I saw people were sort of tweeting about Harry Potter fan theories, and she'd like reply and be like, no, that's wrong. And it's like, yeah, she did write Harry Potter, but like she can't control like how people choose to sort of make theories and stuff.
With the Harry Potter thing, it's just how people are interpreting characters and books or whatever, and I don't think obviously J.K. Rowling should just be like, it's the bottom line, this character is this or that. You should just leave it up to the audience to interpret the book in their own way.
Yeah, and those sort of ideas where fans add their own theories in some way makes a franchise continue. Like for example, Harry Potter Harry Potter itself is over, but it still manages to continue because there are these fans coming up with different ideas. And it actually somewhat links to something I discovered when I was doing my research into this, a theory called like fan entitlement, which refers to how fans feel like they are owed something from the creator. And I think that's quite interesting, especially when you look at certain films like the Star Wars franchise, how the fans thought they had an entitlement to a certain character and they wanted that character removed for X, Y, and Z, which I'm sure some of you will be speaking about. That's why I don't want to ruin it.
Yeah, let's talk about Star Wars. Yeah. I guess we're on that topic now. It's always a good place to start because, you know, Star Wars fans can be a bit nuts sometimes. Yeah. I did a bit of a search, and apparently the worst Star Wars fans are actually called the Fandom Menace. I found that funny.
That's good.
Star Wars fans like things to be a certain way a lot of the time. The majority, not all, but the majority are like nice people who just like watching sci-fi fantasy films. There's no problem with that. But then you got like the really like harsh and cruel people who are just like the original trilogy happened and then nothing else, and then that's it. And then you have like a mixture of people liking the original trilogy and the prequels or the sequels or whatever, and you got people who just hate The Last Jedi for reasons unknown. And it's just, you got the misogynists and, you know, just a bunch of weird, annoying people who just want to cause controversy when there really shouldn't be any.
I think this links to a really good kind of more broad point, but I think it's very well demonstrated with Star Wars. And I think the problem with fandom and fan influence on franchises is it lends itself a lot to this problem where you have a very vocal minority whose voice becomes much louder than the silent minority.
Yeah.
Silent majority. I knew I was going to mess that up. So you can get this horrible situation where most people aren't necessarily in agreement, but you know, if one voice is louder and it gets heard, the decisions will still be made and the changes will be made, possibly to the detriment of the overall, you know, even within the fan base. So, and I think Star Wars has suffered from that, particularly with things that certain fans picked up on from The Last Jedi, which basically led to Rose being cut from most of whatever the last
Yeah.
film, Rise of Skywalker.
Do you think that's quite? I think that's quite shameful, really, because she basically ended up taking a back seat during that film. I mean, I guess we can only speculate as to whether a character would have played a bigger role, regardless of the abuse. But I think it's probably just sort of pandering to those loud and toxic fanboys, really.
Yeah. I think it's that sort of stuff is like, I don't want to obviously go down a massive wormhole of social media, but that's fan culture has in some ways been made better and worse by social media. And as you were talking about, it's the minorities, not the majorities, that speak the loudest, and then that gets picked up. And as a human, like, just the actors themselves will be able to see that, and the studios will be able to see that, and then studios, whenever they see anything that might be detrimental to like their money, will just freak out and do whatever.
Obviously, we know about Rose, the actress, Kelly Marie Tran. She left. The same thing happened to Daisy Ridley. She got a lot of abuse because she posted an anti-gun sort of message on her Instagram, I believe, or Facebook, one of the two. She received a lot of abuse for it because certain people found it a bit hypocritical. How can she be anti-gun when she's in a film where there's lasers shooting at people? Star Wars, that fictional film with the fictional people, with the fictional world. These people got angry about that, and she received a lot of harassment for it, and that's not even sort of anything to do with, well, it's probably because she's not well liked character really amongst some people.
When Jimmy was saying about like the minority group of people, it made me think about how fan service. So like the Rise of Skywalker had quite a lot of fan service in it, and fan service comes from like pretty much from referencing previous films or like books and TV shows and stuff. So like the problem with fan service is it gets stuck in like a loop of only what's come before, and normally what's come before is all like based in the culture it was created in. So like that's why having a female character to people seems so wrong, because like they weren't that many female characters before, and like fan service would mean you'd keep going the way it was. If TV shows aren't and films aren't brave enough to break out of giving fans what they want, they'll just never evolve and like change.
I think you're dead right, Peter. I think it can be really disruptive and destructive to the creative process. I think you're exactly right. I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, when Peter mentioned about the fan service with the sequels, George Lucas, he met with Disney and then they agreed like the sale of his company or whatever. And Lucas had these sort of characters and these ideas for how he wanted these sequels to go, and he was basically told no. So his outlines were discarded in order to make something for the fans.
I feel like even though that's quite a controversial opinion, basically telling the creator of a thing, being like, no, you don't have a say anymore. Sorry, here's your money, go away. But again, I can kind of understand why they went that route, because the prequels were, and I know they're getting a bit more love nowadays, but at the time they were definitely reviled, and a lot of people were just abhorrently against them. I think that they differ in quality, but that I wouldn't call them like the level of the previous films, basically. And then from that, you end up with The Last Jedi, which is them trying something a bit new again, and people didn't like that. And because of that, well, some people did, some people didn't, but the vocal minority, as we mentioned, didn't. And then they go to Rise of Skywalker, which, as we said, is very fan servicey, and it's a bit of a mess. It kind of goes from one point to another, and you're just sort of like, was this going to be explained? And it isn't, and you just kind of have to accept it. Do you think that a poor ending, just in general, affects what came before at all?
Yeah, I always get annoyed when I see that, where like people are like, oh, this completely ruined all the other films. And it's on one hand, it's like they're still there and you can still watch them. And that's always been how I felt. But more recently, I have sort of started to understand, like, you feel let down mostly that like something, especially if you grew up watching the original films and then like these new ones have come out, like it's easy to feel let down or like you just crushed because like you had so much hope for what could have happened. But I also think that it would be interesting to see in like 20 years looking back how people view them, because as James said, the prequels are getting a lot more love now.
Yeah, it depends also how much build up is in each film, like especially when you get a trilogy. Obviously that final film in a trilogy is gonna, you hope, tie everything together, but you've also got to remember there are 3 films with three endings, and it depends how many. If like 1 and 2 leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger, then maybe you'd feel disappointed, but I suppose it depends how rounded the other films are as a whole.
The problem is, like, with the first Star Wars film, he just made Star Wars and then made sequels. It's like the first film is so self-contained, and then the other 2 are like a 2-parter. But now every film that's made is setting up other things.
A perfect example of what Peter's talking about, slightly coming off topic of Star Wars, but I'm sure we'll bring it back, but is the MCU. Like even the TV series set up something for someone else. Like no film in the MCU is self-contained, which I think is very brave, because it means if one film's bad, then you're not necessarily going to understand something else in another film, if that makes sense. Like the MCU is so complex, and like
I just had a think. And I genuinely think you're right, and that like every single MCU film sets up other things that can happen in the MCU, even the first ones, because it all leads to the Avengers, and then that all leads to. That's a bit mental, that.
Well, I was going to make a point about how the Star Wars sequel trilogy wasn't very well constructed as like 3 films ago. There wasn't a lot of communication between the separate writers and directors.
Apparently Rian Johnson was writing The Last Jedi whilst they were filming The Force Awakens, but he wasn't allowed to like be there on set and see what was happening, so he was kind of like setting him up to fail.
That's awful.
I don't understand how such a massive franchise being handled by a company like Disney could be so poorly organised, or certainly on the outside that's what it looks like. Obviously,
can we touch on the Mandalorian for a second? I was thinking, because that's just like a very interesting topic in the Star Wars, in this very Star Wars universe, and is a very recent thing to talk about, because that is a very unique case of them both appealing to the fan service and kind of going back, but it kind of working in like a very surprising way.
Yeah, with The Mandalorian, I'm a fan, and I was well and truly serviced by that series. But yeah, the thing is, like, all those episodes, like, they're really well written. They all work. Like the progression of like the first few episodes, like you're just sort of getting to know the character, and then like slowly an overarching narrative grows. Like they did that so well. And the fan service stuff, like I think is either subtle enough that like it's just like a nice little detail, like you see someone in the background that you recognize, or it's like R2D2 being there, which obviously even if you don't like Star Wars that much, you'll still like appreciate that. So I think like with that's why it's easy for Star Wars, because it's so in popular culture that everyone will recognize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you jump into an MCU film, like randomly down the timeline, if you just pick an MCU film and you haven't seen any of the others, you might find yourself a little bit lost. You'd understand the main character in that film, what's going on, but then the other references and what else is going on, it would be confusing, because with the MCU, what's going on in that timeline might be in another film at the same time, so then that links to that. But when you're talking about The Mandalorian, so I like Star Wars, but I'm not gonna like a diehard fan. I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't know what planet it is just by a picture, but I did manage to pick up on some of the things in The Mandalorian, and I enjoyed it. And I think even if you're not a fan of Star Wars, you could take that as a standalone franchise and enjoy it.
It's what I like about it is that the fan service feels more like world building than it does just putting things there for the sake of, oh look, it's that. It's more like it really fleshes out the world a bit. They do different things with it, and like one of my favorite episodes is like the start of season 2, where they go to like this far off like little village place, and they're being attacked by this big like massive like dragon worm thing, and then they have to go and defeat it with this guy who's like a sheriff, and he has some Mandalorian armor, and so it's just that. And then you have like the whole Tusken Raiders stuff. They were just like sort of like grunts and just like bad guys in the first Star Wars film, but they get fleshed out and they have their own culture, and they're trying to converse with the different townsfolk. And I just found that really interesting, because it's just stuff that you wouldn't even think to touch on when you watch the first film, where it's just sort of like, oh look, there's just some guys who make weird noises. But in this, they managed to take the time to flesh them out and make them actual characters and feel the world a lot more lived in, basically.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, I think the Mandalorian does treat its fan service stuff very well. On kind of the same point, but kind of not. I don't know about you guys, but I almost feel when I see something that is, certainly in my opinion, deliberately fan serving, there's always like that moment of groaning. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. And I felt like that for bits of The Mandalorian. And then like Boba Fett showed up, and I was like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. And I think fan service has that effect. If it resonates with you, then you love it. You love the fact that it's there.
And like going ahead, there's going to be like a million more Star Wars shows now. So do you think that there's going to be a stopping point of like maybe they're kind of biting off a bit more that they can chew with these kinds of shows? Because The Mandalorian was good because it was so different.
And you're talking about will the Star Wars market be oversaturated? I think it's an interesting point, because if they carry on the format like the way they did The Mandalorian, where if you're not necessarily a biggest fan, you can sit down and still enjoy it. And you've got to think there's going to be a constant new wave of new audiences, like constantly there's new people finding new things. So you'll have this constant renewal of an audience. So if you can keep it to the point of like, you don't need to know everything, then at one point, will it not necessarily be a Star Wars film or a Star Wars TV series, but a TV series that is set in the Star Wars thing instead of it being like a focus on Star Wars? Yeah,
it can also, it branches out into more than just TV shows or whatever. Like you got the Star Wars comics. Some guy called Timothy Zahn did the trilogy of novels, and it was known as the Thrawn trilogy. And that was like the comic books in this trilogy were like the reasons why George Lucas went about doing the prequels, and like those books made it into the New York Times bestseller list. There's like multimedia, there's loads of ways of like consuming the world that's created.
And that's a great point as well, Noah, because Thrawn is mentioned in The Mandalorian. Like they chuck that in there for the fans of that. I think if you've read a lot of extended Star Wars stuff that isn't canon anymore because Disney's chucked it out into the Legends verse, but like if you've ever played Star Wars Empire at War or anything like that, like you know who Grand Admiral Thrawn is, and you're excited by that, which is great.
Can I add a bonus point as well? Because when Jimmy was talking about how the Star Wars sequels were badly organized, so like with the whole Rey being Palpatine's granddaughter thing, what's Kathleen Kennedy was saying, like when questioned, she was like, yeah, that was the plan from the very beginning. Like before we even filmed The Force Awakens, that was the plan. But Daisy Ridley recently accidentally revealed in an interview that she only found that out like she opened the script for The Rise of Skywalker and saw that, and she was like, oh, that was never the plan. So like they literally had forced it in at the very end.
At the beginning, there was toying with like an Obi-Wan connection, and then it really went, there were like different versions, and then it really went to that she was no one.
Moving away from like Star Wars and Marvel and all that good stuff, and looking at something a bit slightly different.
So essentially, there's you've got the toxic side of a fandom, and then you've got the non-toxic side of people who are nice and understanding. But so more than often, you get the subsection of people too far in the other direction. People who call themselves stans. So stan culture is the correct term from the Eminem song Stan. Just the whole idea of stans is the concept of like over obsessing over an actor or a character. It's mainly an actor.
Is this a new term? Because I'd never heard.
Are you on Twitter, Jimmy?
That might be right.
Yeah, so it's mainly a Twitter thing, and people kind of it all gets circulated around that sort of ecosystem. What do you think about over obsessing over actors and actresses, guys? Is it an inherently good or bad thing?
It can be really unhealthy. Like, I don't know if you remember, so you probably won't, because this probably will have never, ever, ever crossed your radar. But it did cross mine. So there was a Channel 4 documentary on this sort of thing, but it was before massively this was a big thing. And it was on One Direction fans. And the whole documentary focused on the One Direction fans, and it put them in somewhat of a negative light and somewhat of an obsessive light, and that actually got a lot of backlash from the One Direction fans for the way they were being portrayed. So I think even when you're in that sort of thing, you can't see how unhealthy it is, And when people are saying, "Oh, this isn't good," you just go, "Oh no, you're wrong." They're not willing.
Yeah.
These sorts of people aren't willing to listen to another opinion.
Another popular example of this sort of thing was I'm sure you guys remember Team Edward and Team Jacob.
Oh yeah, I was.
That the Twilight fans just over obsessing over Taylor Lautner and Robert Pattinson to quite unhealthy degrees.
Mark, fun fact. First Jimmy fun fact.
Jimmy fun fact.
Today, Mark Commode thinks those films are a really good laugh and really good fun.
That's because he was Team Edward, so he would be happy because he got the ending resolved that he wanted.
There you go. And linking it back with Fandom, because he'd never read the books, he was like, I don't care if you don't do what the books do. This is great.
It's basically like cult mentality, and like because of the way social media works, it like helps it propagate and grow, and it like just becomes someone's identity. But yeah, so that's one way where it's bad, but it's also like it's just bad for yourself to like have that level of obsession, because it can so easily be crushed.
Reminds me a bit of Game of Thrones as well, is that they had that entire build up of over 8 seasons, and then they get to the last one and then it just tanks and it just completely disappears from pop culture. Like I don't really hear many people talking about Game of Thrones anymore, except from like, oh, they ruined the ending, didn't they?
I didn't even finish the last season.
Me neither.
That's
I've
how
seen
much
all
I
of it
love
except the
Game of
last episode.
I don't know if we want to go into this, but I'll chuck it out there anyway. I always feel like actors and actresses are often on the receiving end of unnecessarily harsh criticism. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to criticize actors and to a lesser extent directors because they are the face of whatever. And I always feel a little bit sorry for actors and actresses because they're, as a screenwriter, there are many times where I've seen lines in films, people have gone, what a horrible performance. And I've gone, to be fair, those lines would have sounded terrible coming out of Robert De Niro or Al Pacino. I think often it's the side effect of having such a public face of the franchise, is that you are on the receiving end of flack. And I think Game of Thrones is a very interesting example of, number one, where you had the 2 screenwriters who people could actually tell you who the screenwriters were, which is very rare. And number 2, where they actually got the flack more, I would say, than any of the actors and cast did. But I think it's an interesting, it links in with auteur theory and the culture of filmmaking, but actors and directors who are very public and put themselves out there, unfortunately do put themselves out there too often, unnecessarily harsh criticism. And this links back in, this is perfectly linked. And this links back in with what we were saying earlier about fans recognizing something wrong, but not necessarily knowing why it's wrong or where that's come from.
I've got another connecting point as we're on it. So the screenwriters, well, the theory is the screenwriters of Game of Thrones, the head writers, can't remember their names, who cares? Basically, they rushed the theory is they rushed the last season so they could go off and make their own Star Wars films. And because they rushed that season, they lost the chance to make their Star Wars films. So
that as well, like fans come up with like alternative endings. Where we were saying about if a bad ending could ruin a film, it can't if you just choose to like believe your own one. And like when I see people saying like, oh, I don't believe this last film's canon, like I'm saying it ends like this.
It reminds me of Dexter a little bit, because I've read a lot of people basically saying that like the first 4 seasons of Dexter are like really good, and then the other 4 seasons come after it. It's like, oh, you shouldn't watch them because they're terrible. I watched Dexter all in one sitting, and like the only really bad season was the last one. Yeah. So and that now they're rebooting it again, they're doing another season to fix that ending a little bit, to give it a bit more closure, which I'm happy about because I like Dexter. But maybe that's again appealing to the fans a little bit, being like, okay, here's your proper ending, guys.
Yes, the perfect example of what you were talking about just then, James, with the films appeasing to the fans, I think, is the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which I don't know if you've seen it, but I loved it. It was good. It was a laugh. But originally, when the trailers were released, there was a big backlash against the way the Sonic looked. Did you guys all see that?
Oh,
yeah,
how
so
could you
funny.
not?
So funny.
And
It's
you
so
all thought it
bad.
was strange as well, yeah.
It was so terrible.
It led to the film's director himself, Jeff Fowler, making a promise. So he big things here, making a promise to fans that he would change it, and he did. And I think the film itself didn't really change. Like, I'm sure the story stayed the same, but that element of the main character Sonic, his entire look changed, which is quite a big thing. And
Incredible.
Must have
Yeah.
cost a lot of money.
I was going to say how much of that cost.
It would have cost a lot, yeah. It's interesting with that because, like, it's all well and good that the fans were right. Like, it did look terrible, and then they made it look better. But the poor, like, it was a lot of work to like redo all that stuff, and it wasn't the director that had to do that work. It was all like the CGI artists and stuff. And because it was so close to the film being released, they had to like work crazy hours to like fix it.
it's his head on the line, isn't it? Like, when you see a
Mm.
film, it, like, obviously everyone's important. Filmmaking is a team effort, but you see a film and you associate it with the director. So
Yeah.
if that film had gone out with the criticism he had, that would have been a suicide move for his career.
Career ending, yeah.
Suicide move, Suicide Squad. Oh,
Oh, that's another point. That's another point.
Oh.
Ironically enough, like Suicide Squad, specifically with its trailer, tried to emulate Guardians of the Galaxy with like all the funky pop tunes and like the like weird characters coming together to be superheroes, but they're not quite superheroes. They're kind of bad guys, really. They're kind of going for that vibe. And now they're doing it again, and they've got the director of Guardians of the Galaxy to just reboot it and just make it properly, which is quite interesting.
It's interesting, this topic we picked this week, because I recently watched Mark Kermode's Secrets of Cinema on the BBC, and the final week he did it on cult films. Now, cult, as you may or may not know, they are films that are basically what makes a cult film is the fans themselves. So, for example, Rocky Horror Picture Show, a film that came out in 1975. It was actually produced by Fox, but it was critically and I think commercially a complete failure. But it became a midnight movie. What happened in those midnight movies is fans would go and they keep going and they go as their like favourite characters. But yeah, cult films. All thanks to fans, those. Razorhead, I might mention that as well because it's David Lynch's first film. Didn't get released to like a massive amount of cinemas. It became a midnight movie again, and then over time it just sort of got more and more sort of popular sort of underground. And Lynch would do sort of studio-backed films in the 80s like Elephant Man and Dune, which is a complete failure. But you know, does David Lynch owe his career to the fans because of the popularity that he got through those sort of midnight movies?
I think a perfect example of that, and I know James is going to love this point, but The Room.
Like, get the Blu-ray.
Yeah, so bad it's good
He's
sort of
disappeared.
cult.
Here is my signed Blu-ray of The Room.
Like, these midnight screenings, these secret cinemas, is for the fans, because of the fans. And then it elevates these movies, especially midnight screenings. They're massive, aren't they? Like, I hate to bring it back to obviously Star Wars, which talked about death, but Star Wars midnight screenings, massive, huge. And then you've got all these different branches of secret cinema. You can have a secret cinema for anything. Like, I'm pretty sure there was a Ghostbusters one. Stranger Things, which is a TV series, now has secret cinema. And people dress up as their favourite characters, as Noah said. And they immerse themselves in the culture of the film, which is something the fans have done themselves. So this is, on the flip side, a positive experience of these fans owning a franchise or a film or a TV series.
Things like secret cinema and those midnight screenings really give way to genuine like relationships between people. Like I met people at The Room screening who like I never met before, and it was just a laugh, like laughing at the same jokes as them, and like getting in on the in bits that we all knew with each other. And I thought it was really like a joint experience that it can really be a positive thing when the fans want it to be a positive thing.
Yeah, I stumbled across this definition of actually fan culture, which would be quite nice to mention now. It was in a book by Matt Hills, citing Abercrombie and Longhurst. But basically it suggests that the fan is placed along a spectrum of identities and experiences distinguishing between them. So it was talking about how a different level of experience can make you a different level of a fan. And I think secret cinemas are such a perfect example of this, because you're experiencing the movie with other people and you're elevating yourself as a fan. You're just there with other people, and I think it's such a positive experience.
Yeah.
That, like, fan culture is
And you got to thank sort of Blu-ray, those Arrow Video for producing all those films and stuff. They're a big help as well, aren't they, Jimmy?
Yeah, based on fan recommendations, that's how they decide their library. And I think this is what fandom should all be about, exactly as you just said, Emma. It should be bringing people together around film and works of art and great content.
We are now moving on to our game. However, we're doing a bit differently this week because we have a lovely guest. So we're combining our game with our film recommendation section, and we're making it one. So each of us will have picked a film, TV show, whatever, that we really, really like. And you will have 20 seconds to say why it's the best show or film. And then at the end, each of us will place a vote on who we think has the best one. The only rule is you can't vote for yourself. Which...
What a rubbish rule.
So that is the rules. Peter, ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
The film I'm defending might be a bit of a surprise to you. It's a film that's action-packed and full of grievous bodily harm and characters facing certain death. It's, of course, Paddington 2. This film literally has nothing wrong with it. Every scene is meticulously crafted and hits every emotional tone perfectly in key. There's humour, suspense, drama, and a wholesome sense of joy that you won't find in any other film.
Stop.
Every character is believable and fits into the plot perfectly, showcasing the best that the British film industry has to offer. The action scenes are engaging and also serve to move the plot along. That's not to say they don't slow down the pace every now and then to allow us to enjoy the magical effect that simple kindness can have. Sorry, did you say that?
Boo, he
Can cut it
cheated.
short.
That's
We're gonna
cheeking.
cut him off. We're gonna
Yeah.
cut him off at
That's fine.
exactly the 20-second mark.
All
We've
right.
heard it and we can't go back.
You ready for mine?
Go on then.
Go on
3,
then.
2, 1. My film is Shutter Island. It's my absolute favourite. Directed by world-renowned Martin Scorsese. Features Leonardo DiCaprio. The two of them, dream team. Love it. It has twists and turns. It's somewhat a detective movie, but it's also in parts a thriller, maybe even a horror. Has everything in it for everyone. Brilliant film. Would recommend.
No, that was a good 20
Ding, dong,
seconds.
ding, dong.
Jimmy, You ready? 3,
Yeah.
2, 1, go.
Genius is a powerful word, but there's no reason to use it unless you're talking about the Kubrick. 2001: A Space Odyssey. Music, phenomenal. Classic music redefined in space. Best jump cut of all time when he throws the bird up into the air and then it turns into a nuclear missile platform. Giant space baby. Star acid trip. Perfect symmetrical framing. Yeah.
Stop. All right.
Wasted all my time on the intro.
Yeah.
James, ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
To celebrate its most recent 30-year anniversary, I've picked Silence of the Lambs. To this day, it's one of, if not the most successful thriller of all time. It swept the Oscars in the top 5 categories, including Best Picture. The cast brings some career best performances. It has shocking moments that resonate on every viewing. So it's fantastic acting and directing, critically successful, culturally impactful, and scenes that will stick in your mind way after you've seen it.
Nice.
Right.
Right,
Go on then, cheating no bags.
And
alright.
last but not least, that gives us Noah. Are you ready?
Yes.
3, 2, 1, go.
I picked the Richard Linklater film Dazed and Confused. It's the last day of school in 1976. They all just want to go out and have fun. So they go out drinking, they go out smoking weed. They have a lot of fun. And you can have a lot of fun with this film too. And I don't even need the extra 5 seconds to explain myself because this film's perfect.
Good job, guys. Good.
That was intense.
That was wonderful. That was really good.
Why is it like when Emma's like, "Are you ready?" Suddenly, like, it's terrifying.
It is.
Yeah, you're just not ready at all. You were
No.
ready until she asked, and then you're not.
So, we're all going to vote now. So I'll go hands up for, you can only vote once. I'll go hands up for Noah, hands up for Pete. We'll go like that, okay? So hands up for Noah's explanation.
Boo.
What?
Which one? Huh?
Hands up for Peter's.
Boo.
Oh, one for Peter. Hands up for
Not to mention that
Jimmy.
James was
Hands
almost
up
in
for
it.
mine. Oh, thanks, Noah. Hands up for Jimmy. And hands up for James.
Hey,
Oh, James, you're our winner
Outworked,
this
mate.
Clean
week.
sweep.
what preparation gets you?
Unfortunately,
It's
as
what
of
writing a
this
film blog
episode,
gets you as well.
there will be no points going towards you for this week's.
That's all right.
Yay!
I think before we get our winners' thoughts from James, just like to let you all know we do now have our own Facebook page, which will be linked down in the description. So don't forget to go over and give that a little like. On behalf of all of us, thank you, Peter, for joining us.
So my winner's thoughts, basically, it's the joys of preparation, I guess. It was very scary in the moment, but even though I didn't get any points, I still managed to get it done. Hooray. So thank you guys for watching another episode in the bag. I want to give you a special thank you, Mr. Peter Nelson, for coming on our show, being the first guest. You did a fantastic job. We're happy to have you back whenever you like. We'll be able to fit you in.
I'll see you next week and every subsequent week from now on then.
5 Struggling
Yeah.
Filmmakers coming soon to a new YouTube channel.
Spin off. But yeah, seriously, thank you for having me, guys. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of the show and I look forward to all the future episodes.
It's been a pleasure.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Love you.
Thanks everybody for watching. If you guys continue to stay safe, we are going to continue to struggle.
You know,
Sorry, Jimmy, there's a cat, so.
Hey, I didn't know you had a tail.
He's got two. He's got
He's
one
able
of
to like push the door open and eventually get in. So that's why I muted it because it was quite loud for a while.
Ninja cat.
Bless. He's gonna do it.
No, poor little kitty.
Aw.